guys, so I have got a bucket of bare root roses. This bucket of 7 roses maybe showed up at the beginning of last week. It was a tough week last week, lots of rain, just lots of stuff going on inside the house. It's like the minute I try to film outside, I'm reminded I live in a city. This bucket of roses, they've been soaking for 24 hours. I had left them in the box a little too long. I couldn't get them potted earlier this week when they showed up, so I decided to give them like an extra long soak, and we'll just kind of go through them. And I have a box from a different supplier who we can look at how the differences between like truly bare root and people who send kind of grafted bands in some potting medium. Okay, I realize this is a very awkward shot, but it's more important that you see the roses and not really me. So the majority of bare root roses seem to be grafted. There's one specifically labeled as own root. I can't say I know enough about the process to say if it's better or worse. But essentially, after you have hydrated the roses, you just want to, I'm looking for any broken roots. These seem to be okay. And I'm just, there's really no harm. It's just kind of spark the rose into action. I'm gonna trim this like one rather long one off because I am potting them in containers. So when I'm potting them up in the temporary containers, it's not as important to think about the bud union direction, but when you're planting in the ground, you want this side to face the sun, or the majority of the sun. Almost all roses need full sun, but like in my yard, the sun kind of moves diagonally across the yard, so I make sure that all my bud unions are facing the sun rising. The graft onto the rootstock is not going to produce any buds, so any new big canes are going to come out of here. So you just want to make sure that that's getting an adequate amount of sun when you plant it up. You can see that the roots kind of flare, and you want to make sure that I'll show you when I'm potting this one up. These are just 2.5 gallon pots that I bought from a greenhouse supply store. I had to buy a lot of potting containers this year. I try to save them, but because I started so much stuff from seed, and also you know, I'm having to store so many plants that I pre-ordered and things like that, I ended up ordering some larger pots. This pot I ordered by accident. I didn't check the measurements. It's tree sized. I got a 10-pack of them. They were actually quite reasonable, and they are so handy because this batch happens to be all single roses, but I'm making an effort to buy more multiples of things. So I'm trying to use the bigger pots to just kind of group like 3 and 5 roots together, so they're just kind of all organized. So most nurseries saw the canes off, you know, either with like but they kind of just go straight across with no sort of thought. But you do want to give them a cut, and we'll do one of the ones that's already been potted up for a couple weeks. I don't personally feel comfortable just kind of hacking in until I start to see a little growth. You want to treat it just like if you were deadheading a rose, where you're going in, cutting at a 45-degree angle, a centimeter or 2 above a bud. And it's kind of hard to see when they're like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and get these potted up. I have a big pot, I have a few little pots, I have pre-moistened potting mix. Alright, so these came from High Country Roses in Colorado. And you can see they are packaged in little nursery pots. So a lot of times when you see potted roses, they're in like the 2.5 to 5 gallon size. This is more like a 4-inch pot. And it's labeled, and I'm not going to dig in too much. What I'm going to do is just sort of set up another one of these and plant them as I would if I were digging a hole in the ground to pot it. This is Marilyn Monroe. I ordered from all places that were recommended through various members on garden.org, which is the National Gardening Association. There are forums for each specific type of flower. If you watched the Dahlia project last year, that's where I got a lot of information about my Dahlia project. And Maryland is very thorny, but other than, but it's a good place to check. They have lists of suppliers, and it's just, it's a nice resource. And I guess the last thing I should say is that I am not putting any fertilizer in any of these that I'm just potting up for now. I will, we're gonna go fertilize last year's roses for spring. So when they're so young, I don't think it's a good idea to put any kind of fertilizer on them. I'll show you some of the ones that have been potted up for a couple weeks. They're doing great. You want to kind of baby them a little bit. While I only use organic and kind of natural fertilizers, you don't want to shock the plant or burn the roots. When they go into the planting beds, I will add some superphosphate and some biotone and things like that to help kind of like give them to reduce transplant shock when they finally move from these pots out into the landscape. But for now, they all seem to be pretty happy with just some potting mix and some sun and some water. So the last thing to do, which I didn't do on the newly planted ones, is you can see these are some that I planted a couple weeks ago, and they are starting to put on some new growth. So I am just going to cut on an angle right above a bud. And this is very similar to deadheading. We're encouraging the rose to grow outward by cutting above outward facing buds. Basically just trying to establish healthy plants and cut off anything that doesn't really look like it's doing much. Alright, so now that all my bare roots are potted up in temporary containers, I am going to just go around and add a little rose tone fertilizer to my existing roses. I have experimented with frequency of this, but as it's been such a mild spring. I'm probably actually doing this like 2 weeks late, but I wanted to do it as part of the video. I am using the Espuma Rose Tone, and I sort of use kind of whatever's around and whatever's affordable, but I had this in the garage, so that's what I'll be using today. I'm gonna put on a glove to scratch it in, and I'll just kind of show you, but we're gonna sprinkle a smaller amount on some of the very young ones, a little bit more on some of the larger roses, and just kind of scratch it in. We've had so much rain, the ground's pretty damp. I'm not too worried about watering it in today because we're probably gonna get more rain. Hi guys! I made an exuberant bouquet out of stuff that I just cut, and some of the stuff I cut a few days ago. So I'm trying to make something from the garden every single week. I'm trying to put it somewhere where it doesn't go up my nose. I mean, I think we're all gonna be having rough hair days. All right guys, I hope you enjoyed seeing me pot up some of my bare root and young roses, baby roses. Well, actually, I shouldn't say baby roses because a lot of times people call baby roses miniature or spray roses. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing me pot up my bare root and young roses for this upcoming season. Obviously, once we have some garden beds in place, I will be putting them into their regular homes. But for now, I think they're okay. I've realized that I have the epitome of a nursery. I'm just caring for all these young plants while we try to get our beds finished. But everything looks pretty good, happy, healthy, and then you saw me fertilize. I would say that you can kind of use whatever fertilizer you have handy. When looking at the difference in formulas, there's not a whole lot of variation. Like the rose tone is 432. You'll see a lot of 444. I'm probably not the best person to speak to the individual components of a fertilizer, but you kind of can't go wrong in early spring giving everything like a little dose of something like long lasting, like the Espuma brand or Job's Organic, or there's just like a ton of options out there. But obviously the best thing you can do is try to create healthy soil in your beds. And that's really why I'm waiting. After we get our grading and fence put in, which probably will happen over the next 3 to 4 weeks, I will be doing no dig beds and conditioning our pretty untouched soil. I mean, untouched under the weeds. But I will be putting down cardboard and compost, kind of doing the Charles Dowding method to create my beds. So the idea is that you should really let those sit for about a year, but you can go ahead and start planting in them if needed. And just it'll help me kind of alleviate some of the weeds that we know will come back with a vengeance, and sort of start to help condition the bed. So I really feel like this was always planned to be a building year for building up the beds and building up the plant collections and things like that. Since I think people liked it in my fall peony planting video, I'll just give you guys like a few slides of the roses that I'm planting that are in those bare root pots or those holding pots. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.